This ABC 11 special is sponsored by Auction Direct USA.
Deadly storm surge, fierce winds, and flooding. Just some of the elements that make hurricanes the greatest storms on Earth. North Carolina is no stranger to the incredible destruction, with names like Fran, Floyd, and Matthew still fresh in the minds of many. With the 2018 hurricane season just days away, now is the time to get storm ready.
And now from ABC 11, a First Alert weather special. Storm Ready, Hurricane 2018.
Good evening, I'm Chief Meteorologist Chris Holman. The 2018 hurricane season is only days away. And while North Carolina was spared last year, many areas were not. Tonight, the First Alert weather team is going to give you tips on how to stay safe this hurricane season, what you need to do to be prepared. But we start with the predictions for 2018. Forecasters are already saying it's going to be another active season.
Researchers at North Carolina State University have been poring over data to determine how active this hurricane season will be. Dr. Leon Shea says there is conflicting data this year. One model says the season will only be slightly more active than usual, while another is predicting many more storms.
So we're going to take an average, a so-called composite analysis. Okay, let's take both models and do an average and use that as a forecast.
So here's their prediction for the Atlantic, Gulf of Mexico, and Caribbean Sea. 14 to 18 named storms. 11 of those could become hurricanes, and 3 to 5 of those major hurricanes, Category 3 or higher. In an average season, there are about 11 storms. Shea says his team looks at a vast amount of data to determine their forecast, but it comes down to two things: ocean temperatures and upper-level winds. Knowing the current conditions of those is important, but it's more important to know what they will be doing when hurricane season is in full swing. And that's the hard part.
Some years we are doing very well, and some other years when the conditions are more difficult to predict, everybody fails, and sometimes we fail as well.
And while Shea and his team cannot forecast where a hurricane will strike, he says their seasonal forecast should be used to plan ahead.
These preseason forecasts, I would say it's more like a warm-up for people to pay attention to the actual forecast coming out from the National Hurricane Center.
To be classified as a hurricane, a tropical system has to have sustained winds of 74 miles per hour. The Saffir-Simpson scale divides hurricanes into 5 categories. A Category 1 hurricane is the weakest, but it can still knock shingles off roofs and knock down small trees. A Category 4 hurricane has 156 mile per hour winds and can flatten mobile homes. A Category 5 hurricane is catastrophic. Even well-built homes on slabs can be leveled. Meteorologist Brittany Bell traveled to the IBH Center in South Carolina, the only facility in the world where they're testing hurricane-force winds on 2-story structures.
The IBHS Research Center has 105 of these fans, and they can simulate up to a Category 3 hurricane. This testing is crucial in making sure our homes are as safe as possible.
The goal of the IBHS Research Center is to advance building science by accurately testing the strength of natural disasters like hurricanes. The fans help to portray what exactly hurricane-force winds can do to homes. That specific testing has already led to new findings, like closing your interior doors during a hurricane.
When the wind comes into a house, it wants to push up and push out on the building. By closing the interior doors, you're only going to get the uplift onto the roof in that small area, versus if all of your interior doors are open, the wind's going to spread out through the entire house and going to push on the whole roof. So your chances of losing the roof are higher if you have the air spreading out throughout the whole house.
The facility can even depict the size of a raindrop, showing the impact wind-driven rain can have on a home. This demonstration shows how water can seep into your home with only 50 mile per hour winds. So to prevent that, it's important to have a sealed roof deck. That means that you seal the seams of your roof with tape to prevent water from getting into your home. There are other ways that you can keep your home weather safe. You can find out more by going to our website at abc11.com.
You may be surprised to learn that storm surge is deadlier than the wind in a hurricane. The stronger the winds, though, the higher the storm surge. A 6-foot storm surge would put this beach underwater. Meteorologist Steve Stewart is here to tell us why the storm surge is so deadly.
Thanks, Chris. The storm surge is something you've been hearing about, again, up and down the Gulf Coast, along our coastline, all the way up even as far north as New York City. It all depends on a tropical system, and in some cases, even a nor'easter, a strong nor'easter can do the same type of thing, which is storm surge. So what exactly is it? Well, where the hurricane is, it actually has so much vertical development, it's lifting the ocean up a bit, in some cases as much as a foot or two. That's significant. You couple that with high tide, and then the strong winds. The winds are what pushes all this water on shore. And one of the things you have to look at is the coastal shelf. Just how shallow is it? With all that water coming in, that means the waves and swells are going to be much larger, of course, and make it even farther inland. And the stronger the storm, the more of a surge that we get. So we break it down into categories. Category 1, you can have up to around a 5-foot surge. Category 2 can get up to 8 feet. And once you get to Category 3, we're talking upwards of a 9-foot storm surge. So let's think about that for a second. What exactly is that going to look like? So if we had a situation like this and there's a vehicle, a Category 1 surge, the potential up to around 3 feet or so. That's a lot of water. And that's moving water with the big swells that are coming inland, right? So we have moving water, which is excessively dangerous, and it's going to be enough to completely destroy your car. Category 2, now most cars are going to be submerged. SUVs might not. At this point, just think about how much damage you're going to get and look at your house. The water's going into the house as well. And then this one here, as you can barely see me anymore, this would be a Category 3 storm where we get up to 9 and slightly above that. That is one thing we will never see in central North Carolina. And fortunately, we haven't had that for a long time along our coast.
When it comes to these destructive storms, being prepared can save your life. Meteorologist Don Schwenneker is here now to tell us what you need in your disaster preparedness kit to stay safe.
Here are 5 things you want to have on hand if a hurricane heads your way. And actually, they're pretty good things to have on hand just for any type of weather emergency, from a tornado to a winter storm. Number 1, you're going to need bottled water, and lots of it. You got to figure on 1 gallon of water per person per day. So a family of 4 are actually going to need 20 gallons of drinkable water for 5 days. And you may need some extra water to cook with and certainly to flush your toilets with. So before the storm hits, fill up your bathtubs with the stopper in as an extra water resource. Number 2, dry goods, and canned fruit. Cans of protein like chicken or tuna or soup. They're all good things you can have on hand. And don't forget to have a hand-powered can opener, one of those old-fashioned ones. You might not have power to open those cans. Fresh fruit, peanut butter, crackers, bread, granola, chips, they're also good things to have in your storage, things that really don't need refrigeration. And if you've got pets, make sure and have some extra pet food too. Number 3, medications. Make sure you have at least a 2-week supply on hand of any medications. You might not be able to get to a pharmacy or your doctor, and have some other over-the-counter medications on hand too, like ibuprofen or aspirin. And don't forget Band-Aids and antibiotic cream for unexpected injuries. Number 4, batteries. Lots of them, and all the various sizes you might need for your flashlights or your radio. And right now, if you think about it, purchase a hand crank charger, or a solar charger, one that doesn't need electricity to charge. You can use that for things like your cell phone. Number 5, paper and plastic goods. You'll be happy you have these. Sandwich bags that seal across the top, like Ziploc sandwich bags, can be used as waterproof storage if needed. And also paper towels and paper plates are handy to have because you might not be able to wash dishes if you don't have enough water. And make sure to have lots of toilet paper too. You do not want to run out of the old TP. Finally, other supplies that are good to have in any type of emergency include bug spray and bleach. Your bug repellent should have DEET, and it should keep mosquitoes away and ticks away. And bleach can actually help you clean up from all kinds of nasty messes. You know, with just a little bit of preparation right now and a trip to the store today, you won't have to worry about when the next hurricane moves into the Carolinas.
Still ahead, we take a look back at the 2017 hurricane season. It was catastrophic and devastated parts of Texas, Florida, and Puerto Rico. That's coming up. The 2017 hurricane season was catastrophic. There were 17 named storms, 10 hurricanes, and 6 major hurricanes. That's Category 3 or higher, tying it for the second most active hurricane season on record. The season got off to a fast start with Arlene in late April, a month before the official start of the season. But it wasn't until August that the season turned disastrous. The storm's name? Harvey.
Tropical Storm Harvey moved through the Caribbean harmlessly in late August, but rapidly intensified in the Gulf of Mexico. It slammed into Texas on the 26th as a Category 4 hurricane with 130-mile-per-hour winds. It was the first major hurricane to strike the U.S. since Wilma in 2005, and the first Category 4 hurricane to batter Texas since 1961. Wind and storm surge damage was extensive on the Middle Texas coast, but dire predictions of catastrophic flooding came to fruition in Houston. Floodwaters submerged major highways, forced residents to their roofs and attics, and overwhelmed emergency lines. The storm produced as much as 60 inches of rain in just a few days, the highest recorded for any tropical system in the U.S. Harvey killed over 100 people, including 30 in the Houston area. Just as Harvey slammed into Texas, another tropical wave emerged off the coast of Africa, and by August 30th, Tropical Storm Irma was born. The storm strengthened as it marched westward and was a rare Category 5 monster by September 5th with 180-mile-per-hour winds. The storm destroyed the island of Barbuda. It weakened a bit, but barreled into the Florida Keys as a Category 4 hurricane with 130-mile-per-hour winds on September the 10th. It then moved north along the west coast of Florida before dissipating over Georgia a few days later. Irma flattened parts of the Keys and killed 134 people, including 92 in the U.S. Irma set some impressive records along its disastrous journey. It's the strongest Atlantic storm outside of the Gulf of Mexico or Caribbean on record. And its 180-mile-per-hour winds lasted 37 straight hours, the longest on record for the world. Harvey and Irma were a 1-2 punch. 2 Category 4 hurricanes hitting the U.S. in the span of 2 weeks. That's never happened before. After Irma, 3 more storms menaced the Atlantic Basin, but it wasn't until Maria that catastrophe struck again. Maria developed in the Atlantic on September 16th and once again intensified rapidly into another Category 5 hurricane. The storm pummeled Dominica on September 19th with 165-mile-per-hour winds and then set its sights on Puerto Rico. Maria crashed into the island on September 20th with 155-mile-per-hour winds and a devastating storm surge. The official death toll in Puerto Rico is 64, but many officials believe the actual number of fatalities is closer to 1,000. The 2017 hurricane season was the costliest on record, a staggering $282 billion in damage. And most of that damage was caused by Harvey, Irma, and Maria. But the toll on survivors and those that lost loved ones in these ferocious storms is immeasurable.
Coming up next, we'll delve into the science of naming hurricanes and tropical storms. How they get their name and how the names are picked might surprise you. Plus, we'll talk to the Army Corps of Engineers, how they keep these beaches so wide, so full of sand, how they replenish these beaches. That's coming up.
I'm meteorologist Steve Stewart here at Wrightsville Beach. You know, we have some of the most beautiful beaches anywhere in America, but in order to keep them this beautiful and ready for hurricane season, takes a lot of people, a lot of money. This process is called beach nourishment. The United States Army Corps of Engineers does this at 4 major North Carolina beaches, Wrightsville, Carolina, Curie, and Ocean Isle, once every 4 years. Wrightsville Beach was the most recent to complete this process, where 800,000 cubic yards of sand was replenished. For reference, that's 80,000 10-yard dump trucks.
The whole purpose of this project is to put enough sand on the shoreline so that a period of time can pass to ensure that the dune, which is right behind us, doesn't fill. The key about the dune is you don't want that to fill. That is your last barrier of protection, of reduction of risk of flooding due to these storms.
If a hurricane causes significant erosion, the Army Corps of Engineers will have to adjust the timing of the nourishment program based on the severity of the damage. The cost involved is quite high. Just for Wrightsville Beach alone, it was $9.5 million, 65% of which is paid for by the federal government. The remaining costs are picked up by the state and sponsors. Other than protecting property, the other benefit from beach nourishment, beautiful sandy beaches.
All you have to do is just look. and see what the results and what this means to like a town of Wrightsville Beach or means to the town of Caroline Beach.
Tropical storms and hurricanes have been getting names since 1953. Meteorologist Don Schwenniker tells us how and why certain names are chosen.
Thanks, Chris. You know, when it comes to hurricanes, we get lots of questions. So let's go behind the scenes and meet some of our behind the scenes folks and answer some of those questions for you. Here's the first one.
Hey, Big Weather, it's Anna from production. How do they come up with names for hurricanes?
Well, thanks, Anna. Believe it or not, there's actually a pretty strict process for choosing those names. The list comes from a group called the World Meteorological Organization. They found out that short names are easier for people to remember, and they try to use names from the countries that are in that area. If we look at this year's list for the Atlantic and the Caribbean, we find names from Spanish-speaking countries like Puerto Rico or Cuba. So we have names like Alberto or Ernesto. We have French-speaking countries like Haiti and Martinique, so Raphael is on the list. And we have English-speaking countries, so we have names like Debbie and Michael. In other parts of the world, they use names from those areas. In the Western Pacific, a storm might be named Kajiki or Feng Wang this year. And we use the same names every 6 years. So this year we may have an Alberto. We may again have Alberto in 2024.
Hey, Big Weather, it's Halston from production. What happens when they run out of names?
Thanks, Halston. You know, if they use up all the names on the list, there are actually 21 of them, but if they use them all up in 1 year, they switch to the Greek alphabet. And that happened only once in 2007. The National Hurricane Center ended up having to use Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, Epsilon, and Zeta.
Hey, Big Weather, it's Kaylee from the Web Department. Quick question, why do we stop using certain names on the list?
Thanks, Kaylee. You know, if a storm becomes too strong and causes too much damage or unfortunately kills a lot of people, they remove that name from the list for reasons of sensitivity. Simply put, no one wants to go through another Hurricane Andrew or Katrina. There were 4 names retired from last year's list: Harvey, Irma, Maria, and Nate. So the next time you're tracking that storm and you wonder where they come up with that name, you'll at least know. And you can also find a list of this year's names on our website, abc11.com. Chris?
Still ahead, how volunteers are already hard at work making sure the elderly are storm ready.
You probably heard many times meteorologists talk about spaghetti plots or spaghetti models. What that basically means is when we're tracking tropical systems, all the different models, you lay them out at once, and sometimes it looks like a big bowl of spaghetti. Well, I only plotted a few. This is from Maria last year, but you can find some rogue models that take it well away from where the grouping is. And typically that's what we look for, the grouping, and the more consensus with the models that gives a better forecast. The official track comes to the National Hurricane Center. We call that the cone of uncertainty. So you don't want to really look at that center line as much as the entire cone. The more narrow the cone is, the higher the confidence. The wider the cone, the less the confidence, because it could be anywhere within this cone as it moves along its particular path. So once again, when tropical storms do develop, you'll hear us talking about the spaghetti models and again, the official track. Chris?
Some folks need a little extra help in being prepared for hurricane season. Meteorologist Brittany Bell is in nearby Wilmington to tell us how volunteers there are making sure everyone is storm ready.
First responders immediately spring into action when a hurricane strikes, but volunteers like those here at the New Hanover County Senior Resource Center play a vital role in making sure people get the help they need.
We're trying to update these papers that we have in case we were to have some kind of an event like a hurricane.
The volunteers are a part of what's called the Special Needs Registry. It's a voluntary registry of individuals that will need extra assistance before, during, and after a natural disaster like a hurricane. People on this list include the elderly, frail, and disabled, and they can be extra vulnerable in the event of the hurricane. And these volunteer groups give them the specific tools they need if they have to evacuate.
Say you had an event and it damaged your lungs this year, so you would need to go to the shelter, right? But you're oxygen dependent. By having the Special Needs Registry, it alerts the counties also that these shelters are going to need to have a backup of oxygen supply.
There's also another organization called the Community Emergency Response Team, also known as CERT. The goal of CERT is to train people to help themselves and neighbors immediately after a disaster. Their job to be a crucial line of defense in helping people after a hurricane strikes.
And with our very limited, very basic knowledge, we can do some good things to help. Again, knowing that we're not first responders, and so we're not going to do anything drastic. But if you're bleeding, we can probably put a tourniquet on you, or we learn how to do CPR.
These volunteers know their community like the back of their hand, so in some cases they can distribute help before the professionals arrive. They are one of many examples of everyday people taking action to help themselves and neighbors during hurricane season. If you're interested in joining, you can check with your local emergency management group to see what volunteer options are available.
North Carolina has a long history with devastating hurricanes. Being prepared in case one hits this year can make all the difference in the world. The First Alert team will be with you every step of the way this hurricane season to make sure you're safe, just in case. Have a great evening.
This ABC 11 special is sponsored by Auction Direct USA.